For someone who's not familiar, setting up payroll can be a very confusing and complicated process, and any little mistake could result in future penalties and fines. During this video, we're going to demonstrate how to set up your QuickBooks Online payroll by walking you through each of the steps, helping you answer all of their setup questions before we ultimately show you how to complete your first payroll processing. So whether you're brand new to payroll or just want to make sure your setup was done correctly, join us as we walk through our complete guide to QuickBooks Online payroll. Hey, thanks for checking this video out. Hi, my name is Matthew Fulton, and as a cloud-based accountant, I help companies improve their efficiency and profitability through personalized training, app integrations, and customized workflows. During this video, we're going to do a deep dive into QuickBooks Online payroll. Now, this is going to be a longer video, and we're going to cover a wide range of topics, including which of the different service offerings are best for your company. We'll walk you through step-by-step of setting up a brand new payroll account, including what questions they're going to be asking and what information you'll need to know. Then we're going to help you also understand if you're migrating your data over from a different payroll provider, what information you need and what can be pulled over versus what you have to do manually. We'll also show you the process of inviting a new employee to where they're able to access through Workforce app, set up their own personal information, and even establish their own tax deductions the way they want. From there, we'll quickly show you what type of historical payroll data you might need to pull in and how to enter that information in. Then we're going to make sure you have your payroll set up correctly by explaining the accounting preferences and how you map your payroll to your chart of accounts. Finally, when it comes time to pay your employees, we're going to show you both how you can manually pay employees by entering in their time, their commissions, information, or we'll also show you how to set up QuickBooks Time and how you can utilize that to track their time, import it to finally do that payroll processing. On purpose, this is going to be a very long and detailed video. Now, with that in mind, we've taken the time in the notes below to give the different chapter breakouts. So in case you have a specific question you want to jump to, feel free to go ahead and do so. Now, of course, if you're looking to learn more and hoping to get more support beyond this video, at the very end, we're going to talk to you about the different ways you can, of course, connect with us. Now, the last thing before we get started, if you haven't already, take a quick moment to like and subscribe to this channel. Don't forget to hit the bell so you're notified when we release new videos. Now, why don't we jump in and we'll get started right away talking about the different service levels offered by QuickBooks Online. So as a business owner, when you first land on this page, you're immediately going to see the different functions or options to choose between the different levels of QuickBooks Online payroll. As you can see here, there's basically three different tiers: your core, your premium, and your elite. Your core version is going to do your full service payroll, and what that means is you're the one responsible for entering in the hours a person worked, if there's any special like deductions you need to have. But what they will do is if you've already set up things like health benefits, paid time off, vacation, if those things have been set up on the backside, they'll auto-calculate all that information, generate the paychecks for you to where you select and say, hey, yes, I approve it. And then they will then create the checks. And if it's direct deposit to people, it's a next day direct deposit. If it's paper check, you can then print them and then hand them out. Now, one other thing with the core setup is if you're transferring payroll mid-year, they will not assist you in transferring your data from a different payroll provider over into the new one. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that is something noteworthy to definitely pay attention to. When you move up to the premium version, now the premium adds on the integrated time tracking, which is a really, really big benefit. So what that allows you to do is now your employees can be clocking in and clocking out, tracking their time that specific way. And then you can start to use that information into QuickBooks Online projects where you can assign it to customers, so forth, which is our ultimate end goal with this. This also steps up to where your direct deposit is now same day direct deposit. And for both of these, we're talking there's certain time cutoff by like 5 p.m. business day, if I remember correctly. At the premium level, it also now introduced the opportunity for workers' comp administration. Now, what that means is you can sign up with their workers' comp provider as long as you get approved, and it will do a pay-as-you-go type of subscription to where every pay period, it'll calculate what you should be owing for the workers' comp for that period and deduct it from your account. This is nice because when it comes to your annual workers' comp audit, you're far less likely to have any money owed at the end of the year because it will be more, it's taking the money more consistently throughout the year. It helps a lot of businesses with cash flow as well. What it does not specifically do, though, is if you have to deal with multiple class codes in workers' comp, that's a whole different level of tracking that won't be specifically covered inside that part of it. Now, at the premium level, as I talked real quickly before about if you're bringing your data like mid-year into QuickBooks Online Payroll, they will do what they call an expert review, which means they will review the work after you put everything in. And it's an important part that we're going to talk about as we do the setup, like the information you would need. So this is something to really take into consideration. Now, the next one from there is the Elite. And of course, Elite is what they're going to try. They recommend everybody. And I truly, I would suggest it. The benefit of doing it this way, if you're using QuickBooks Online and having the payroll that's all built in, it makes it easier to see all your financials all in one place, all tied together without having to use third-party app integrations where they're bringing stuff in through journal entries, so forth. But more important to you as a business owner, where this, the extra value add here is you still, like all the other ones, the health benefits for your teams are still there. So what that means is if you've set up and registered through their health benefits provider, it'll track the amount that needs to come out of each paycheck for you. And you still have to send the payment out, but it handles that part, of course. They give you the expert product support, same day direct deposit, of course. But it also provides an HR support center. So actually, I forgot, the premium has HR as well, a little bit deeper dive. What this one really does, its primary difference right off the bat, is the expert setup. So what that means is they will ask you for specific information reports from your prior payroll provider, and they will upload and get everything set up and established for you. That definitely helps quite a bit, makes it a lot easier. And the one other detail on this is when you have the Elite, it also includes their tax penalty protection. This is the only plan that actually has the full tax penalty protection. Now, at the very bottom of the page here, there are a ton of disclaimers, guarantees, everything else. I strongly recommend you slow down, take the time to read through this information. I started to before I made this video, but just talking about each and every one of these things in itself would be a video all on its own. So please take the time, review that before you go too far, of course. Now, one of the other things you're probably noticing right off the bat is as you're inside here to entice you to get this set up, you'll notice that this is basically offering you a 50% off for 3 months for any of the plans that you select. While we do our setup, I'm going to, on purpose, we're going to set up and do the premium version where in a sense they could turn around and help review the stuff, but I'm going to do this the harder way on purpose to show you what's involved if you need to be uploading your own data to get things prepped and set up. So we're going to sign up right now. So this is one of those areas I'm going to pause our recording, fill in all the information that's going to be necessary so I can basically register and create this new account. Okay, so I entered all my details in. It's now going through and doing our setting up our account. Woohoo! So now we've got our welcome to QuickBooks Payroll. Let's get acquainted and let's get started. We'll go ahead and click Get Started. So this is the first important question. Have you paid employees in 2023? No, I'm not sure, and yes. So why is this important? Let's take a quick moment to pause and talk about that. If you've already been using a different payroll provider and you're switching mid-year, that means we need to upload or tell QuickBooks Online Payroll who's been paid, how much they've been paid so far this year, how much tax has been withheld, and how much taxes you've already paid out to the state. So it requires a lot more setup to do this. This is why I strongly recommend you should only switch your payroll provider, preferably at the beginning of your fiscal year. If you really must do a transition otherwise, try to align it at the end of a quarter. The reason you're doing this is, with the payroll, you already have to file quarterly returns, known as your 941. You're going to use that 941 report to be able to populate all the details of each employee, how much their wages were, how much tax was withheld, and how many payments that you've had to make. So if you can line it straight to a quarter, it makes it easier to do the calculations and make sure everything's nice and clean and legit. It also helps because you want to make sure that if you had an older payroll provider and if they were responsible for filing the quarterly, that gets handled and you don't have where there's a gap and it's like they were supposed to, and you get those penalties and fines. So if this is a brand new company, no payroll's ever been done before, then the quick, easy answer, of course, on this, it would be no. If you do have it, you would say yes. Let's go with I'm not sure and see what happens to it. As you can see here, it says to calculate the right payroll taxes for you, we need to know about all the payments to your employees in 2023. If you haven't paid employees in 2023, select no. Let's go next. So it's going to push you to do either one, which is kind of what I was expecting. So if we hit yes, now the next thing it's going to ask you is when is your next payday? The reason this is important is because they need to determine which tax period the payroll is going to fall into. This is related to what I was just talking about with the quarterly periods of time. So as it says here, if your next payday with us is next quarter, we'll take care of your payroll tax starting that quarter. If it's during a current quarter, that means they need to actually calculate how much tax has been withheld all the way up to that point in the quarter, then start tracking the rest and make sure that they would be the ones taking over the responsibility for filing the tax reports, everything else at the end of the quarter. So if we click on here, it's saying pick a date between July 1st and December 31st. That's because we are recording this video on August 9th inside, past July 1st for that beginning of that quarter date. So starting into the third quarter. So let's say our next pay period, we're going to give ourselves some time here, is going to be on the 18th. We'll click next. Now, one thing you can do here is if you know you're going to be starting this into the next quarter, you could get in here, set this up ahead of time, which I strongly recommend, and then you would go to what is the end of the quarter. So traditional would be September 30th. By doing that, you get everything set up ahead of time, but you actually start running the payroll at the beginning of the next quarter. We'll come back here, we'll go next. All right, so then we got our business name, our street address, information. This is populating based off the information already put in. And it's making sure I do it the right way. So the next detail it's going to ask is, and you'll have to excuse my last pass is trying to populate some stuff here. So we'll put this back in correctly here. Phone number, email address, and we'll go next. So from this page, basically what they're trying to do is ask you who you were using to process your payroll before so they can help you bring in some of that data. What they've done is they actually have the ability, as you can click into these and see, they can extract certain information from these listed payroll providers. And if you're not using either the ADP, Gusto, or Paychecks, there's the other option where you can kind of do this manually. Now, it's important when you go through and you look at this, what I noticed is for ADP specifically, they'll pull in the tax information, the W-4s, deductions, contributions, and garnishments. And they'll pull that same information in for Paychecks, but for Gusto, they do not. With ADP, they'll also pull in information about contractors, but they do not do that for Gusto or Paychecks. And if you don't have your payroll reporting, if you can't find that stuff, again, you can still do all of this manually. since we're trying to go through the whole process and we're doing this kind of fake wise, we're going to have to fake it to make it. And we're going to come in, we'll go Spreadsheet. If we click here, what's nice about this is they will actually give you an example of a spreadsheet where you can fill everything in. So if you have 20 employees, you can basically fill in all the details, in all the information you need, download the template, populate all this stuff in, and then you'll be able to upload that. And that's going to get you the very core basic information uploaded into the company file. So what I've done is I just downloaded this file, and we're going to basically show you the process if you're importing from a spreadsheet, and then we can still go add other members on. So to show you real quick, what I've done is I took their template, updated it with my employees' information inside here, exactly along the line basically, and saved it. And now I'll close this out real quick. Let's go import from a spreadsheet. We'll automatically import your team to save you time. Awesome. We'll go next. Now we're going to go and choose it. It's basically telling us, we use a template, so it should make it super, super easy, right? But it is telling us when you upload it, you want to make sure top row has the headers, all employees' information must be on one sheet, first, last name are the only things that are required. And then it says include all W-2 employees you paid. So anybody that you paid during the whole year, that's a key thing. So if you're bringing over other payroll information for the whole year, if you paid people during the year but you terminated them, they still need to be on here because you're going to have to actually add in and calculate how much they made during those periods. So your taxes, everything else would be correct. So let's go and say select from my computer. Got it in my downloads. Boom. Open. Bring this in. And we'll go next. So spreadsheet, now is our mapping in case you played with stuff. So first name, employee first name, middle initial, this should all map exact since I stole it from their template. What the reason you have the mapping here is if you did have it from a different payroll provider that wasn't listed, you could take an employee list from them, map the right columns, and import it that way as well, instead of having to move and shift things around, of course. Pay type, we've got that here. What's this here? You'll be able to add other pay types in the next step. So bonuses, vacations, so forth. And we'll go next. Reviewed 1 of 2. Worked like a charm. Your dream team is looking great. We found one new employee to pull into QuickBooks. And that is because I put my name as the same name and email as I am the employee that's setting this up. That's why there was only one. So now we need to complete your employee information. And from here, let's see here, we would basically click onto it. And now we have the ability to start setting up everything for our employee. Okay, so there's a lot to cover even on just this one page, especially since QuickBooks Online Payroll has been doing a lot to improve their whole payroll processing. They've added new fields you can use. They've even been improving their different layers of security, which we'll kind of talk about here. So starting at the very top, the first thing you're going to notice here is that you've got this where it says QuickBooks Time, QuickBooks Workforce, and Employee Self Setup. So what these are about. QuickBooks Time, again, if you're on the Premium or Elite, you have the ability automatic for employees to be logging in and out through a mobile device, or you can have a single computer that's set up that people have to clock in and clock out there, but it becomes a digital clocking in and clocking out. With that, they also have the ability that you can start to have them break out their time activities against certain projects or customers if you're looking to do job costing of any sort or project profitability tracking. The next part of this, of course, then is you also have your QuickBooks Workforce. Now, what QuickBooks Workforce does is it's a way for the employees themselves to be able to view their pay stubs, their W-2s, all of that information right within QuickBooks Workforce. This makes it really nice at the end of the year. They can get their W-2 faster, do their taxes faster. The whole app now for time is basically called QuickBooks Workforce, and your employees will definitely appreciate you setting it up. One of the nice things with Workforce also is if they're set up with direct deposit, once you process your payroll, they'll be notified saying, hey, you've been paid, direct deposit's on its way. So I find it's one of the greatest ways to have your employees showing up to work the next day knowing they've already been paid. Then the last part here is the employee self setup. Now this is especially really cool like when you're bringing new employees on, because it gives them a link to where they can go and fill in all of their own personal information, tax information, and banking details inside that QuickBooks workforce so they can set up their direct deposit. You're not having to sit there, collect forms, and have somebody go back in and put all that in them yourself. Having them go through that way also is great, again, because the tax settings, they set it. So there's no question or concern like, well, I didn't mean to choose this, because you don't want to be the HR professional on somebody's tax, giving them tax advice. To turn it on, you would click this and it's going to say ask, again, Spartacus is the name I put in, to self setup in workforce. So it's got the first name, last name, and the email to send it to. We're going to go ahead and we're going to say send the email. And I did this on purpose. This way we could go through and try to record that part of the process also. So now that we did that part, it also invited to workforce because, hey, they need to be able to use that to actually do anything with it. So on the screen, what else do we see here right now? Personal information. So inside here, if I click edit, I can come in, first name, last name, middle initial, and preferred first name. So I prefer to go by spot, we'll say. Home phone number, work phone number, and mobile phone number that can be put into all of these. This information is just for record-wise. It's not actually used for anything specific inside the program, like you're not really calling from it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. We'll save that. Then our next section we've got is our employment details. From the employee details page, you can see there's quite a few different things that need to be set up correctly. So if we start off with the status, you're going to notice there are some predefined statuses that you need to select for each of the different employees. So your active, of course, is your active employees that are on payroll. You're paying them all the time. You want them there. Your paid leave of absence, this is somebody that maybe is off for a period of time, but you've agreed to continue to pay them. That will still leave them on your list of employees when you're running each pay cycle, in comparison to the unpaid leave of absence, where by doing that, their name won't show up and you don't have to uncheck the box for it. Now the terminated, this is a little bit different. You want to click, when you click terminated, it's then going to ask you for a termination date. And this becomes important because traditionally with almost all states, you have to report the termination date for unemployment, so forth. Now, not on payroll is basically just kind of a buffer of, hey, they're not on payroll. We're not doing anything with them at this time. So you would then, it's like if you had a seasonal employee, this would be a great use for that. You would have them off for a bit of time until it comes time to bring them back. And then you wouldn't have to reset up all of the information again. And then unfortunately, should you have this happen deceased, I think it kind of explains what it is. If somebody happened to be passed away, you would mark them as deceased there instead. So I'm going to put myself as active, of course. Now the next part is your hire date. The hire date, if we're doing this initial setup, that's going to be populated in automatic for you. But this is important when you're doing new hires because this is going to be part of how you report those new hires to your state. It's also important because it helps for calculations of like vacation time, completing your payroll tax forms, even paid time off. All that information will be based off of a hire date quite often. Your pay schedule, you're going to have a default since we import the information as a weekly, but you can actually create custom pay schedules inside here. So if you want to have somebody, if you want it to be that they're paid every, weekly, you can set up a pay schedule that way. You can have bi-weekly, you can have once a month, you can have on the 1st and the 15th. You can customize quite a bit of that. We'll try to cover that a little bit later as well. Work location. So the work location, what this is for, there's a couple of reasons for this. One is it gives you another way to break out the detail of the reporting. So if you have multiple locations where people are at, quite often you'll need that for like workers' comp reporting, for insurance, so forth. So you can list multiple work locations and break your payroll out by those different locations if you add that in. A brand new function is this manager tab. So from a manager tab, at the moment, we don't have any employees in, but if we had an employee in that was as a manager, you could actually set up where here's the manager and they report to these people just for somewhat of a hierarchy. This is excellent for companies that have a much bigger, staff. You can really map it out and direct it that way. Department, same kind of thing, that if you have different departments, maybe an accounting department versus sales department, you can add those in, break it out, keep your payroll a little more organized also. Your job title, you can add in yourself. It's not necessary, but if you want it in there, it doesn't hurt. Then your employee ID. So if you, again, as your staff increases, if you've got these different employee ID numbers, helps with reporting. It's also a good thing that, quite often this payroll information you need to keep private. So if you're doing reports, to try to use the employee ID number instead of a name to hide personal information. And then the last one is your workers' comp class code. So this is a pretty important one that you want to, when you're setting up a new employee, you want to take the time to find out what comp code they should be in and attribute it here as quick as you can. If you don't know it right away, you want to follow back up and put this in. Because what this will do is you will have the ability to run workers' comp reports, and it's going to break out the wages by the different comp class codes. Now, the only thing this doesn't do is if you have a scenario where you have an employee that has multiple comp codes, because maybe construction, something of that nature, you can only do one comp code per employee. This also plays in if you do set up, as you can see at the bottom here, it says need workers' comp insurance, click. You can set up that pay-as-you-go workers' comp through this, and it will use that again for the tracking of all that information. Since I don't have a code at the moment, I'm not going to put one in, but let's go ahead and hit save. Okay, so the next step as we dive into this would be our tax withholdings. Now, if you remember correctly, though, what we did is we actually invited the employee, myself in this scenario, to do the setup themselves. So you're going to see here it says, hey, we asked Spartacus to fill out their 2021 Form W-4 in Workforce. Need to use an earlier Form W-4? Go ahead, turn off the employee self-setup, and then you can enter the information in. You'll also see at the top here in the personal, it said, hey, we asked Spartacus to fill the rest of this out in Workforce. So what we need to do is at this moment, we'll pull up Workforce in an incognito window and go through that process so you can kind of see what that looks like as well. So we're going to jump over to our email here, and we can see at the top here it says, Power Projects by QBCL needs info to get you paid. So we're going to click on this. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to click on the Get Setup. Now keep in mind, I used the same email address that I used to log myself in, which means I already have an Intuit account. So because of that, I'm going to switch over to sign in, but an employee would basically go through with their email, create their own password, save this, and that would become their username, their password to be able to log into this information. So for us, we're going to go to sign in instead. We've got this here. I'm going to use my LastPass to get me what I need. And we'll go accept invitation. So now that we're inside our workforce, as the employee, we're going to go through and let's go through this setup process. So we're basically going to go through and answer these all one by one. You can see at the top here, it's giving us a progress bar, of course. We've got our address information. That's stuff we already populated in. It's going to ask us for our birthday. So we'll say 4/01/1980. April Fools. How do we identify name? Why are they asking this? Some states require it. Next. Then it's going to ask us for our social security number. Let's see if it'll let me do that. Beautiful. So now we got all of our personal information done. Next, we can hit the pencil, of course, if we wanted to update those details. The next thing it's going to do is take us over to our emergency contact. and we'll say my mother. 5555121 and so phone number, email, your choice if you want, or you can even skip it right now if you wish to. We'll go ahead and just leave it like that. So the next section we're going to have to take care of is our bank details. Now again, we're looking at this from the employee's perspective. And if you didn't already know, Intuit QuickBooks purchased Credit Karma a while back, which is a great program to help people like track their credit score and build up their credit rating. So what they're doing now is they're offering the ability that you can get a Credit Karma money checking account. So if you have certain employees that don't have a checking account for one reason or another, this is a possibility where they could get this special type of Credit Karma checking account. If you read the fine print below, and I do suggest you do before selecting it, it basically says that you can set up and open a no-fee line of credit and a no-fee savings account. You have to create both at the time. And to be eligible for it, you have to have a TransUnion credit score of 619 or below at the time of the application. You also have to have a connected paycheck or a qualified direct deposit to be able to activate this whole setup. Read the details below. It'll tell you a little bit more about it. Qualified direct deposit basically means that you had another payroll direct deposit going into the account or within a 90-day period of opening and activating it. So if an employee wants to do that, they can do it. As the employer, you would never know they did it this way. If you already have a bank account and you just want to link it that way, you would just go in and say link bank account. So from here, of course, you're going to choose your different direct deposit methods. So deposit to one account, two accounts, direct deposit with balance as a check. So what do these mean? If you want the entire check just to go to straight one account, which is the most common, wham, bam, good, done. And I can tell you employees, as employers, we really appreciate it, especially as accountants, we appreciate it that way. But if you do want to split it up to where it's like, hey, you want to take $100 and push it to one account every single pay cycle and then keep the rest to yourself, you can do it that way as well. When you click on direct for two accounts, it's going to ask you to fill in the information for both, of course. And you're going to do the first account is either by amount or percentage, and then the remaining of whatever is going to go immediately to the second one. So if you want to have a specific amount go to one account, you'd set that up as account one. Like, hey, I want $50 every time to this account. That becomes account one, $50. And then the remainder always goes to that second account. Of course, the alternative would be you could do a direct deposit and then have the remainder come as a paper check. In this world, paperless world, please don't do that. The owners won't like it and the accountants won't like it, but you can do it if you really have to, but don't do it. So we're just going to say direct deposit to one account. You're going to choose the type of account, checking or savings. You got to put your routing, accounting, and confirm all this information in. Okay, so now I put all this stuff in, and you can see it says your direct deposit's all set up to go, and we'll now click next. So next, tax withholding. Heads up on tax withholdings. This section has info to help you fill out your W-4. Check out the IRS W-4 instructions. You can click here to get to the instructions, of course. That'll download it, and we'll go close. So we'll go next. And again, the nice thing, from the employee side, you should be doing this yourself. From the employer side, you don't want to provide any guidance on this so it doesn't come back to bite you in the rear. So single, married filing, so forth. Again, I just said not to give too much advice on it. It's important for you to research it. I'm not going to dive into these. We'll go boom. How many dependents do you have to claim? This is the new, the change you made a couple years back. So for me, I have no kids. Other dependents, I wish I could claim my dogs. You can get a little extra detail down here, like age-wise, everything else. So I'm in big trouble. They're going to take the most possible. Complete this step if you have multiple jobs or your spouse works. So if you have multiple jobs, you're going to click this box. It's kind of nice they do it this way. You've got the details below. Check this box when you or your household have 2 jobs of similar pay. Be sure to check this box in step 2C on your spouse's W-4 form for the second job, or also on for your own on the other job, of course. We'll click next. So in my situation, I don't actually have it. I'm going to go back and I'm going to take that off. So we'll click next, and now we have our other adjustments. And if we click to learn more here, you can see a little bit more details. Your IRS form will give you more information here. But basic other income, as it says here, it's may include like interest, dividends, retirement income. So the intent there is like, if you know you're gonna have this stuff coming in, you can try to populate it here where you're paying more tax out of this check to try to catch you up before the end of the year if you wanted to do it that way. Your deductions might include itemized deductions, such as student loan interest, to where on the flip side, if you want to reduce it for something like that, again, you need to talk to your own tax professional on those items to figure out what you'd like to do. And then the bottom part is extra withholding. That is same kind of concept. If you want to have extra withheld from each check, you can do that. Some people will do something like this because they want to more back at the end of the year. Others won't because they want to use their money throughout the whole year. Follow up with your tax professional, of course. So now we're going to go into our state. So because I listed I was in California, it saw that. It's now, what is your California withholdings? So in here, I am doing the same thing, withholdings, allowance. You can, follow through on that and make your own decisions, of course. But now we've basically got all of our tax withholdings all set up, happy to go. And now our next part is going to be, we need to set up and review it and sign it. So I've got all of our details, our address, our birthdays showing up, gender. Let's go paycheck preferences, where we want it to go to, tax withholdings, whether what we said we wanted or not, and we can click next. This becomes the digital signed version of this, which is super, super, super important because we're required to keep a copy of that. This makes it is legal and a great way to do it. So Spartacus Maximus, and then you would click sign and send. All right, so now we've filled out all of our form. You're all set, you're good to go. And as the employee inside of here, you would then be able to click and see paychecks if they were there, your W-2, at the end of the year, if you've been there multiple years, you'd see that stuff. This is awesome. Ditch the snail mail, go paperless with W-2s. This will make it to where you get the digital version. It's all filed digital. You keep copy here. You can get your taxes done even faster, basically, as the employee. And then you'll have all your profile information that's populating inside of this as well. So you can go back, take a look at it. You can even add a picture here now, which is kind of cool. Let's see here. So now that we've basically gone through and we've updated as the employee all of our information, why don't we jump back over and we're going to get back to being the owner again and see the update of the information and go forward from there. So now we're back over again for our first employee, and it's saying, okay, we need to finish completing our employee information. So we're going to click on me again. And inside of here, let's take a look what's basically happened at this point. So now we're not getting that top piece that's saying, hey, you're waiting for the employee to fill that information in. We can now see this has been activated as well. We can see the tax withholding information has been filled in, but I could edit it if I need to. Payment method, direct deposits here. Pay type is going to be the next section we can go into. And then we also have the emergency contact information is available at the bottom here as well. So let's dive in a little bit on the pay types. We're going to click edit. And again, this is information we had already kind of pushed up, so forth. But here we can start to see different pay types that are automatic. So in here, you're going to have an hourly, a salary, and a commission only. You can add additional pay types as well. And as you can see here, if we've got our hourly, we've got our rate per hour, and you can set a default number of hours. So what this is basically doing is when you go and process your payroll itself, if you have the hours set in here, so hours per week, per day and days per week. So let's say it was hours per day is your 5 and it's 5, means it would create 25, right? It's going to automatically populate as 25 hours every time you go to process payroll. So if it was different, you'd have to change it. Now this is helpful also with salary wise, but you're going to want to decide whether you really want to do that or not. Then you can have a secondary payroll type that you can label these different ways. You can call it whatever you want. So a great example for something like this is, again, possibly in construction, if you're paying somebody at one rate to do painting versus electrical wage, you could do this way if you wanted to. So once you've created the second one for electrical, you can click it to choose it. It's going to ask you for a rate per hour. Let's say we put it in for 50. And now you'd have the ability, you could break out different periods of time by the different wage. So it would be calculated that way. Now, again, you can add on other additional pay types and keep going and going and going, and then choose whether you want to only show active ones or all of them across this. So then there's additional information to set up within your other common pay types. If we start with our overtime pay, the first question it's going to ask you is, what's the first day of the work week? Now this is important because of the FLSA guidelines that basically a work week is fixed, recurring period of 7 24-hour days. That has to do with how overtime and double overtime is calculated. So it's super important. And anything you said here is going to go across all employees. You don't set up a different work week for different employees. So in most scenarios, we usually set up Sunday as the beginning of the week. We like to do it that way for, when we're setting up employee payrolls because it makes it easier to pay them on Friday. Next week starts Sunday just for clockwise. Now, if you are using time tracking, you will need to set up additional information about your overtime in QuickBooks Time so it knows when to allocate as to overtime based on your state and federal laws. Then double overtime, same idea, will be part of that. Now, let's talk about the distinction between some of these real quick. For holiday pay, if you decide that you're going to pay your employees for an extra day off because of a holiday weekend and so forth, that is fundamentally different than them selecting or choosing to do like paid time off and the way those things are calculated. So if you're doing that by clicking the holiday pay, it's a better way to track it. You can choose by the hours, put it in. It also impacts sometimes your workers' comp, depending on your state, on how that's calculated as well. So it's important to have that extra distinction there when you're choosing these options. A bonus specifically is going to be like, it's different than a commission, of course. It's where if somebody's getting an actual bonus, like, hey, you did a great job, we're going to give you a bonus of $500, because there could be different tax ramifications specifically to how that bonus is taxed. And then your commissions, that's an extra field you can add on, and you can add on additional types as well. Now, the reason the commissions need to be split out is that in itself also may change the way that overtime is calculated. And I will say that this part of payroll, it doesn't calculate commissions for you. This is where you put a dollar amount in specific of what the commissions were that were earned. So then our next section is going to be our time off pay policies. And I touched base on part of this again when we talked about holiday pay, but you've got your paid time off, unpaid time off, sick pay, vacation. If we hover over this, paid time off is any time an employee is being paid while away from work and not working. For example, pregnancy leave, sick leave, and other types of leave. So sick leave is, I know it said that there, you need to check within your state how that's specifically handled. There are different policies for those sometimes, so which is why you are able to set up your own policies for each of these. So maybe you don't have a paid time off, so you don't offer just, hey, you get X amount of paid time off, whatever reason you want. You can have 2 days a year for whatever reason. You would go add new policy. You would describe it and say 2 days free paid time off. Probably not label it that way, but you get the point. Now you have to choose, how are the hours accrued? Is it going to be at the beginning of a year, each pay period, per hour worked, on an anniversary date, or unlimited? And this, on all of these, start to get into very specific state law ramifications that you need to do your own research onto to make sure you set it up correctly. So in this scenario, since we're saying it's 2 days free paid time off every year, we're going to actually set this one up on an anniversary date. And hours per year, we're going to say is 16, and then maximum allowed. So this maximum allowed, when you're setting this up, if you have something that's accruing over time, if it doesn't have a maximum, it will keep accruing. So we want to set that this would be a maximum of 16 on this specific one. Then we'd hit save. You then at that point would have the ability for a current balance. So if we go back to the idea that we're already setting, we're setting up a payroll that's already been running, you would run reports from your prior processing and add this in. If it's a new employee, of course, they wouldn't have any. Unpaid time off, you can set up a policy there if you want, or nothing. Now, sick pay, I'm going to add this one in, but again, I want to show you how a different calculation would work. This is just an example. You need to talk to your own state representative of how you should be doing this. So I'm going to call this my paid sick leave, and I'm going to say California. And in this scenario, it happens to be for California, you have a couple ways you can do something like this. One where you can front load the hours. And if you do something like that, the minimum hours a person is entitled to as paid sick leave is 24 hours per year, or you can do it as accrued per hour work or per pay period. Now it happens to be in California, they would actually get 0.033 hours per hour worked towards their paid sick leave. And then you can set, in this scenario, you could set up again for the maximum if that's what you want to do at 24 hours, so it doesn't ever go beyond that. If you didn't, again, it would be able to expand past that. Vacation policy, same kind of situation. Now keep in mind, again, just kind of giving some details depending on the state where you're at. Certain things like paid sick leave, depending on the state, is not required to be paid out upon a termination, but vacation pay is traditionally for most states. Vacation pay means paid time off that has been arranged with the employer. And all of these will be based usually off of the hire date, which is what you're seeing there. So let's go a little bit further down and talk about your additional pay types now. This is the area where payroll really starts getting pretty complicated. And if you're really diving into a lot of these, I really am going to strongly recommend that you go to the elite setup to make sure these things are being done correctly. There are certain pay types that are very unique to different industries. You can see clergy that has certain tax ramifications, and you would select it and then set up the amount, so forth. Reimbursements. So if you have a person that is consistently having to pay for things and they get reimbursed every pay period, you can set up the reimbursement and then set up, if you wish, a recurring amount of that reimbursement. Now, it's important to know if you do it this way, as you go from one year to the next, that reimbursement will continue to stay there. You can, of course, add other ones and rename them as you wish. So if you want to be more specific about it, you could do so. Allowances, same kind of concept. So cash tips and paycheck tips. If you're in a restaurant and you need to be tracking those, you would want to turn these on for the employee so it'll show up. I'm going to click this on. We'll go look at a pay period a little bit later and you'll see what we're talking about. Then you're going to have some other items like your non-taxable per diem. So things that if you're being paid a per diem that is not supposed to be taxed, you need to track it correctly. Different things for your insurances, health insurance, HSA contribution. These are being tracked independently because of, again, whether they're pre-tax, post-tax, so forth. Other earnings types, if you need, and you can name these as you wish, of course. Personal use of car. Take your time, go through these, talk to your payroll professional to really help you get this part set up. Now let's hit save. So we've basically handled all the different ways we're going to be paying the employee. Now we need to also take a look at what about different deductions and contributions. So what do these kind of things look like? Obviously, your deductions, contributions are going to be like your health insurance, retirement plans, loan repayments, and more. Now, loan repayments, I'm going to touch base on purpose in a second here. So you basically add one in, you're going to select and choose from these. If you're doing, let's say you're going to do a loan repayment, you would choose an other deduction, select the type, cash advance repayment, loan repayment, other after-tax deductions, or wage garnishments. You also have garnishments below. The reason I wanted to stress the part about like cash advance repayment and loan repayment is when you set it up this way, you have the ability that you're going to put a description on. It's got to be short but long enough to make sense. That'll show up on the paycheck itself. And then you're going to choose how much you want to be deducted from each pay cycle. So description will say new computer loan. Got our description. We can do flat amount, percent of gross pay, or per hour worked. I'm going to do a flat amount, makes it easier to track this stuff. And let's say it's $50 per pay period with an annual maximum of $500. When you set this up, what will happen is during that year itself, it will take $50 every pay period till it reaches $500. Now, one thing that's important to know though is if you don't go back in once it's been paid off, you need to basically change that amount in back to zero. So, or change the annual amount back to zero. So the next year it doesn't start trying to take that amount again. Super, super important to know that. So your other deductions, we're going to come over here. Let's click on it again. And this time, you know, there could be a couple of things. If you're doing a health insurance one, you're going to select, choose which type it is, of course. We'll say it is Kaiser Health. Calculate as flat amount, percentage of gross, whichever is best. Most healthcare plans, you're going to be able to figure out what their monthly portion of it is. And this is going to be the amount per paycheck. So that means if you're paying weekly versus biweekly, you need to take a look at that. You should talk to your insurance provider to have them help you, find out these numbers. Let's say it's 125. Your annual maximum on this, you would take what your total amount is times 12 to try to give that total amount into there. I'm just going to put that for now. And then you need to choose whether this is a pre-tax or post-tax deduction. So to avoid penalties, choose a premium type based on your plan documents. If you're not sure, contact your plan administrator like we've been saying. So let's say this is a pre-tax insurance premium. Then the last part you have to do is figure out what the company contribution is. We'll track your contributions, but it's your responsibility to pay it. So what this is saying here is, hey, we're going to help you. So maybe it's matching 50-50, right? So it's 125 here, same maximum. All this is going to do is track what the company's portion would be. The employee's portion will be deducted from their pay, and the company will be holding it. And then it's going to track the additional liability of the employer's portion. So when you then go and make the payment, it would go against a liability account for that. We'll click Save on here. And then the last one that I wanted to kind of draw attention to is for retirement plans. Now, with retirement plans, this is one you really want to make sure you're dealing with your tax professional, the person that's helping set this up, because a lot of these will have a specific percentage of wages, like they'll match 3% of your pay. So if you're doing that, you're going to want to set it up where it's based off a percentage of pay. But if people are ranging in hours all over the place, the employer's portion may become out of alignment and you're going to have to do a true up over time. So be very careful how this is set up and make sure to do a review with your actual professional and review it every quarter, of course. Garnishments. Garnishments are never fun, of course. So your garnishments will give you a couple of different types to do here. Let's do child spousal support and we'll say child support. So again, all of these things would be showing up. It's going to show you the amount that would be requested. And as it says here, this is the amount that will be deducted per paycheck. If allowed by the order, include any administrative fees that you add. Note that this amount may be lessened once disposable earnings is calculated. So when you're dealing with garnishments, let's say they're saying they want $50 every single time, right? But the maximum percentage of disposable income is 25%. Well, the way they calculate that disposable income, if it doesn't provide for 50, you only get what it can. So as it says, disposable income is gross pay minus mandatory taxes. It is based on the federal regulations, and the corresponding language in the order is the total withheld amount, including your fee, cannot exceed percentage of the employee's obligators' aggregated disposable weekly earnings. So you may see that it's reduced a bit. And keep in mind, even with these, what would end up happening is this is not going to pay them. It's calculating it, but it's still your obligation to make those payments out to the proper organization. And you want to put any kind of, I put child support. That's a horrible description. You should put a case number, everything else in there, in case, heaven forbid, you have to do multiple on a same person. So now we've got everything basically inside here, and we should pretty much be good to go. We could hit done, but real quickly, we'll take a look. We've got under our documents. Inside of here, this is our signed W-4, the information we already, as the employee we put together. And then you also have the ability, you can add new documents. This is something that they've just been working on, which I think is great. So you can create specific folders for an employee. So if you have reviews, employee reviews, you could put them in here. If you receive those documents for garnishments, any of that information could be saved here, should be saved here. If somebody gets a raise, you'd want to put the documentation here so you can always reference back to that information. So, and you can add a document from a mobile or upload it to this device, which is pretty cool. And then your notes section, this is a great place. You can add notes to say something like Spartacus gets a raise after 30 days and put the dating and so forth, right? And then that would populate into here as well. So really it would be notes of like received a raise on such and such a date, or changed workers' comp code from this to this on such and such a date. Things to make the job a little bit easier as the payroll manager. Okay, so as of this point, what that means is we basically just finally finished setting up our first employee. As you can see, there's a lot involved to this, but if you take the time, you do it right, that's the most important thing. From your actions here, you can then go through, turn off their access to workforce if for some reason, change their status, and if you've got Paychecks going through, you can't really actually delete an employee. If you haven't sent them the invite for QuickBooks Time, you could send that invite to them. It's going to reconfirm where it's going to. We'll hit the send email, and that will then send over to where I can get registered for QuickBooks Time, of course. So now we've done one employee. I'm going to go back to my payroll area, and I'm going to see my employee list. So from here, I've got the choice to see all active, all employees inactive, all the information I'd like to see. You also have a privacy tab to hide pay rates so other people can't see it. And you have the ability that you can now, of course, add a different employee or edit payroll items as well. So under payroll items, we can see pay types. We can see the stuff we created, hourly, electrical, commission, overtime, double time, so forth. And then deductions and contributions, we can see these specific listing ones. Again, you'd want to create unique ones for any kind of loans for each individual person. So if I was to come in, I've only got the one employee. Let's go ahead and click done. Now our next employee that we would do, we could actually just come in and start to put this information in. Add the person in, first name, last name, email, and boom, send it for the employee self-setup. Makes your job a lot easier right off the bat. I strongly recommend taking advantage of this, of course. If you don't, you can do all this stuff all yourself. All right, so let's go back to our overview now. We're inside of here, and we need to still go through and finish additional details about the business, everything else. So get ready to pay your team. You can see we've got our task list that's here telling us what we've got to do. So we've got our paydays set. We've set up the business information basically, as in work location and contact information, but we still need to do our business tax info, our payroll history, and then of course connect our own business bank account to where they can pull funds from for direct deposit, everything else. So let's go into our enter your tax information. So for your business payroll tax information, this is your general business information as it basically says here. Company legal name, your legal street address, and then your company type. Sole prop, nonprofit, other set up on here. So we're saying I'm an S Corp, we'll go other. We'll go next. And now this is where you should have your employee ID number, identification number, I should say. If you have never done payroll before, you will not have this yet, and you will need to apply for an EIN, employee identification number. This will take you, if you follow that link, it's going to take you over to how to apply and what information that you're going to need. It's so you can basically set up as the responsible party for the payroll, submit the application to be able to get that EIN number. If you don't have it, you can apply for it right away so we can pay and file your taxes. You can still run your payroll as it says. Just be sure to come back and add it here once you get it. And you need to add it in like ASAP. So maybe run one payroll processing if you have to. Don't wait much longer than that. It really shouldn't take that much time. Then the next question is going to be, which payroll tax form do you file with the IRS? And it's going to give you the different options on here basically. So your 941 is the most common one for most businesses out there. The 943 is if you're in agriculture, they have a specific form that you would use. And then the 944 is if you're only having to file annual. And this really has to do with the amount of payroll that you're processing every month, every quarter. The higher your amount of your payroll, the more frequently you actually have to make your payroll tax payments, and the more frequently you have to do your updating and your reporting. Again, here you could say, I'm not sure. So if you don't have your EIN yet, you're not going to know this stuff. You'd say, I'm not sure for both, and you'd have to go back and do it. Most often, the larger the company, it's going to more likely be semi-weekly. If you're just a startup and you're not doing much, you're only paying one person, you probably can do quarterly. You should double check to reconfirm. I'm going to go with this. I'm going to go semi-weekly, and we're going to go next. And then again, I'm in California, so it's showing us California. If you were in a different state, it would also show you there. This is asking for our employee ID number for California. If you don't have one yet, same kind of scenario. You can come back to put it in. If you do have it, you want to get it in there right away. It's also going to ask you, of course, your same cycle of how often do you need to pay those taxes. And then this is a super important one, the unemployment insurance rate. This actually changes every single year, and you'll get an update report based on how much you've actually used your unemployment. So you've had a lot of employees that got laid off, used your unemployment, it's going to go up higher. You want to make sure you get this number correct. If you don't, it would be deducting the wrong amount, and you'll have to catch it up at the end of the year. So very important to reconfirm. Otherwise, you'll start with the default, but you have to go back and get the right number. Super, super important. And then your employee training tax rate. Again, this is something specific for California. Most states have it. You're going to check that amount. Then you would click and say done. Get employer account number. We noticed you missed adding your employer account number. Our trusted partner, CorpNet, will work with the state for you and help you register for an account number. So CorpNet is a great company. If you need to register a corporation and get all these things set up, you can do it and pay them. I'm going to say no thanks at this time. That's a new add-on. I haven't seen that before. All right, so you're going to notice it says enter the rest of your tax info because we didn't actually finish that part. But we're still trying to go through the whole process. So we're going to go through, and again, if we're adding payroll history, you probably have those numbers. You get the gist. We're making a demo here. So this is the fun and difficult part. So what you have to do at this stage is, in this scenario, again, we said that we were coming from a different payroll provider. So if you haven't done any payroll, you're not going to have to worry about this part. But if you're coming from a different payroll provider, you actually need to set up every single employee that you have paid any money as a W-2 throughout the entire year, whether they're on payroll or not, and you need to update and add in how much you've actually paid them. So this is going to then say, did you pay Spartacus anytime from January 1st of the year up to June 30th? So that's Q1, Q2. Yes or no. If you say yes, it's going to ask you to fill in the final amounts for all of these. These are all the things we added on, right? Cash, tips, reimbursement. If those pay types aren't there, you wouldn't have them there. But you would end up running reports in your old pay program from January 1st to June 30th, if that's the date, for each employee, find out what the year-to-date totals are, and add all of this in. Taxes withheld, everything else. These numbers need to be accurate, 100% on the dot. If the numbers on the tax, everything else doesn't roll up correctly, it won't actually let you move on from this part. So for the purpose of this video and to show you how the numbers have to be able to go in, I basically did a quick calculation and pretending I only had one paycheck, let's say, before, between January 1st and June 30th. So we'll add these in and show you how this works. So with all this information in, you're going to see I basically took the regular pay amount. I've got our overtime amount, putting that in. We're saying we didn't have any of this other stuff at the time. Federal amount, our Social Security, Medicare, so forth. And then the net pay at the bottom. And it says here, we use net pay to double check for accuracy. So let's go ahead and hit save. And I forgot to answer this other one. Did you pay? I'm going to say no. If I say yes, I need to actually put the year to date because there'd be more pay periods, the combined amount. But let's try to make this easier for a moment and say no, and then hit save. So now we've basically put in the year to date for that person. If I had more employees, I'd continue to do this. We'll go next. And the next part of this is we need to put in what the employer paid for the first and the second quarter of this. So since we're saying it was just the one period, this one I'm going to say 0. This is going to be 13.13. Oops. 1313. But of course, this is where you need those quarterly reports to actually see all the information to put this in correctly. In our scenario, we said there was only one check. It was at the end of the second quarter. Payday coming up. We got your back. We have enough info for you to pay your team. If you're running low on time, If not, let's continue your setup so you can take advantage of automatic tax payments. So this is where most people say, okay, I'm going to quit. I'll come back to this. Don't do it. Finish the setup. Get the setup for the bank account connected. They need to be able to validate it by doing a quick, deposit and withdrawal of a couple pennies here and there. Make sure that's set up so you're good to go when it's time to actually pay your employees. Okay, so let's go in and let's connect our bank. So this process it's very much like when you're connecting your bank feeds in here. You're going to have to go and set up between your bank and give them permission to pull this money back and forth. So we're going to go ahead and say get started. And this is a key area that as we're doing this as the business owner, you'd be able to do this. If for some reason you're an accountant watching this and seeing this part, this is where you have to have specific information about the business owner, the principal officer of the company. So let's go ahead and dive in. We're going to start the first part of this, right? Business. We'll review. Choose your business type. So we're saying we are a S Corp. So we're going to be a corporation. We've got our legal business name. Our EIN, we don't know it yet. We're waiting for that. We'll see if they'll let us get away with not doing that part. Our business address, it goes in. It needs to match, right? So we're going to use this one because it has the extra little 4s on there. Business phone number. This is going to be... And then we're going to choose our industry. So this one we're going to do is accounting wise. And then next. So this is going to hold us up with this EIN. So when dealing with the EIN, this formatting is going to be specifically related to the type of business that you select here. Of course, you need to make sure it's the right business entity type. So if it's a sole proprietor, that disappears because that would then be based off like a social security number. A partnership will usually have a EIN as well, but it could also be a social security number. Now, because I'm trying to get pushed through this, we're going to say it's a sole proprietor at this moment, but you would really need to have the EIN so you can finish this process. We'll come through, we've got our information, and now let's try to hit next and see if we can get away with this. Okay, now, principal officer. Information here, home address in this situation we're saying is the same, and then you're going to have to put in all the specific details and your personal information, social security number, so forth. So we've got everything typed in. Mobile number they're going to use for account verification. Last 4 digits. We're going to click next. And the next part, so when we go to add our bank account, this is probably where we're going to get stuck in the video since it's not going to actually match to my bank. What you'd end up doing is choose your bank, type it in, click it, and go continue. We'll see if this will let us do it this way. Let's actually do this one. Sign in. And it's saying, how would you like to connect? Doing the normal stuff, we're going to say next. This stuff is fine. I know it's okay. We're going to choose the account. Yes. All right. So we've selected the account we want to do this from. Boom. And next. So your account link to move money will also need the routing and account number to verify this information. We make 2 small deposits. So in here, you're going to put the actual information in, the type of account it is, of course, the routing, account number, confirm all of that, and then hit continue. Okay, so basically I put my information in, clicked OK, and now what's going to happen is saying we're going to verify 2 small deposits. They're going to put in 2 things, like one's going to be 17 cents, one's going to be 14 cents. And then you also see that they're going to withdraw the 31 cents, right? So it's evened out. But what has to happen is you're going to look for that, and then you have to validate that. We'll click OK. And at this point, you now can say accept and submit. Okay, so we need to verify your bank account. We'll deposit like we just saw. Once the debt appears in your bank statement or bank website, sign into QuickBooks, enter the exact amount that we debited, and you are set. Got it. So once that's done, it's going to pull you right back into here, and we're going to see basically where we're at. Need to run payroll soon? While we verify your bank account, you can pay your team with paper checks. So you can't run anything direct deposit. You can do paper checks, and you'll still have to follow back up and then do the tax payments, of course. You've got your get a free expert review. Have QuickBooks expert double check your work when you're all set up. A little extra confidence. Sign me up. Boom. And again, if it's the elite, they would have already helped to do a lot of this stuff for you. You see the notification here, direct deposit takes 5 days. To pay your team with direct deposit, run and submit your payroll 5 banking days before payday. This is when you're first getting initially set up. That should actually expedite and be faster. Let's click the link and get you some info. It's not there. Because it's brand new, once it's going, it should be faster than that. It's supposed to be next day. And actually this level and higher, even same day, which means you pay them by 5, they get paid that night. So we can see that with all this, we still have to finish up entering the rest of our tax info because we didn't actually know our state ID number or our EIN. We didn't have those. And we're still watching for those bank account small deposit amounts. So this is great. This is a major improvement of how it was before. They didn't used to have this checklist to where it makes it simple and see kind of where you stand with all of this. Now let's handle your taxes. So the next part of all of this is we basically still have to wait until we get that bank portion handled so we can set up and approve to be able to do the payroll taxes out of the account as well. The last part you'd have to do, of course, is tell them what payroll taxes you've already paid. Because if you remember correctly, we actually recorded that I had 1 paycheck and we talked about the amount that was withheld from mine, but there's also the employer portion. So this would be the part where off of your quarterly reports from your prior company, you would have to pull those reports and you're going to actually tell them per quarter how much you've actually already paid in. So let's dive into that real quick. We'll hit start. And looks like you don't have any past due tax payments from this quarter. Well, that of course is going to be because when we did our setup, we said we hadn't made any extra payments between July and current. But in our Q2 at the very end, because it was in June, we said we had that 1 check and it's saying, hey, we've got that unemployment amount of 1313. And since we said that it was captured, we haven't said yet whether it was paid or not paid yet. If we click paid, it's going to ask us how it was paid or when. If we go not paid, it says if we can, we'll automatically pay these for you. If we can't, we'll put a reminder for you on your to-do list, and then you'd have to make that payment. This again is the area where we'd have to be looking back at with the prior payroll processor, what taxes had been paid on what dates, so forth. So we're going to click continue on here. Current tax quarter, we're saying that the FUTA, because this is annual wise, it's saying we'll automatically pay these upcoming taxes once you've enrolled, and you give them all those numbers. We'll say got it. So now it's saying, okay, because of the pay that happened, did you make all your tax payments in the previous quarter? So for that one, we had, if we remember correctly, we basically had our California SUTA amount as well as our California disability that needed to be paid. These are the employee and employer portions of this. So we need to know, hey, did these get paid, yes or no? If you say yes, we'll go continue to e-sign to basically say that everything's set up. If we go, I'm not sure, okay, we'll add a reminder to your to-do list for you to go back and make sure to grab those reports and put the information in. If you say no, it's going to say, great, we'll put the reminder on. So we're going to say yes, we'll record the payment and go to continue to e-sign. So in this portion, basically what it's doing is we're going to be giving them permission to pay and file our federal, state, and local taxes. And you're going to basically choose how you want this set up. So I want QuickBooks to automatically pay and file my taxes, or you can set up as I'll initiate payments and filings using QuickBooks. That means you go in and you choose when you want it to be done, or I'll pay and file the right agencies through their websites or by mail. In other words, it's outside of this. You're going to do it all on your own, and you'll have zero protection of any of the stuff that they do. Again, on the premium version, there's limited protection. On Elite, if there's ever a penalty because the taxes weren't handled at the Elite level, they'll cover it with specific, asterisks to read through. So let's confirm your tax info. This is where, before we can finish this part, we would actually have to have our federal tax number and our California tax ID number. I don't think we'll be able to get past this. So we would wait, get those numbers, and then come back to put those in and finish the video.
Several days later.
So it's been a couple days since we made the request for those micro deposits to be pulled out of our bank account so we could finish the payroll setup. And I just went in and checked, and I'm seeing now inside of our bank feeds those actual little micro deposits. So as we jump over here, let me show you what it is that you're specifically looking for. Inside of your QuickBooks, or really, you can go take a look at your bank as well, but what you're looking for is you're going to see 3 transactions. There's going to be 2 where you received money and the equivalent amount that goes back out. So these numbers are going to be used to validate that this is the actual account that you should be using. So what we're going to do is we're going to take those numbers and we're going to head over to our payroll settings area. And in here, this is basically going to remind you where we left off and what you still have to do. So as you can see, we've got a couple tasks under our get ready to pay your team. It's checking out most of the things. It says enter the rest of your tax information. And then we got this bottom one here, check your bank account. Look for the 1 to 2 transactions for less than $1. So let's go ahead and click into this one here. We're going to go verify our account. How much did we deposit? So, and this does change all the time. And let's see here. So these numbers won't work. They change across all the time. Boom, account is now connected and we are golden. So what this part does, this means that we can now actually do our direct deposit through here, or they can pay the taxes through it all. It has to have that linking and that connection. So the next part we're going to do here, I still have to go in and we're going to double check, the rest of our tax information. And if I remember correctly, this is going to be asking us for our employee ID number, EIN, and then our state one as well. So I'm going to quickly add in my numbers into this, and then we'll come back once it's saved to proceed forward. So after going back in and finishing up the tax details, again, that EIN number that we were waiting for, and then our state employee ID number, I put both of those in, and you now can see that under our first section, we've got all check marks, so we're looking good here. So now our next section was going to be, let's handle your tasks. We've already connected the bank. You only have to do it once, so it populated right off the bat. And now we're going to go into tell us which taxes you paid this year. So we'll click on Start. So as a reminder, what we're seeing here is the information that's based off of the data we entered in, saying that we had some historical payroll for just the one person, and it was actually just one paycheck is what we put in for it during Q2, but we didn't have any other pay during Q3 yet. So because of that, we can see here, like the date wise, this specific one is not actually due yet, so it's not a situation where it'd be late. It tells us the liability period, and this happens to be for the 940. This is something that's an annual one. If we'd actually put a lot more payroll and everything else, there would have been more likely like 941 details you'd have to put in there and make sure those were paid. So there would have been additional steps and more time you'd have to put into that as well. So now we're basically going to choose, has this been paid or not? I'm going to say that this has been paid because I don't want them to try to go and make that payment. And once I've got this, I'm going to go down to continue to e-sign. We'll mark these taxes as paid. Got it. So again, if there was outstanding, if you were changing mid-quarter and you did have outstanding taxes, you would mark it as not paid, of course. All right, so let's get you ready to pay and file your taxes. So we talked about this before. I want to file them automatically and pay them automatic. We're going to say out of this account, say next. We're going to put these details back in again. And then we will sign and review, right? So we need your company's principal officer to review and sign. So we'll go continue. And I'm going to need to remember that I signed it this way. Verify your information. We couldn't verify your signature. Please try again. And okay, so we're getting this here, of course, because of me putting my name as Spartacus Maximus, which obviously is not correct. So I'm going to click back. I'm going to go back, put the right name into it, and then we'll try that last piece again. Okay, so we're back around, and you can see I put the appropriate first and last name in. All right, so this last step is the one piece where it's super important that you have to have the company's principal officer there to answer these questions because it's going to be very specific to them. It's going to go through, and it's usually about 4 questions that's going to ask you very specific, detailed questions that only you're going to know. So I'm going to basically go through, and I'm going to have to choose whether one of these is right or not, and then go to the next one. So I'm going to pause this, and we'll come right back after I've done those private questions.
A few moments later.
Okay, so I answered all the questions, and they were questions like, which of the following colleges have you attended? Another one asked me the name of a business I worked at, and it was a weird one because the name wasn't exactly right, but I still had to choose the right one. And then it also asked me one like, where does this person live? And it was a person that had the same last name as me, but I didn't know who the person was. So just as an example of kind of the weird type questions. So the last thing we have to do here is basically we're going to check the box and electronically sign these. I would recommend you should click on each one of these, download and save copies. These are the filled in forms that you're authorizing them to send. And we'll hit done. High five! If any final paperwork is needed, we'll let you know and set up tasks. You'll be hearing from us once you're all ready for online tax payments and filings. Until then, you are responsible for making on-time payments and filings. Sounds good. So, okay, so now we're done with these 2 steps. The last thing we've got, take care of your team. So these are add-ons that it's kind of up to you what you wish to do. I will say that they're at a workers' comp policy. One of the things that I like about this, if you don't already have a workers' comp policy, it's definitely worth getting a quote from their company. This is what they call as a pay-as-you-go type workers' comp policy. What that means is you'll be able to have it set up that every pay cycle, they will calculate how much you owe in workers' comp, and then they deduct that amount every single pay cycle. That makes it a little bit easier for cash flow instead of having it where most of the time when you're dealing with like a workers' comp insurance company, usually you'll start by doing like 2 months down, paying for the initial 2 months right away. And then they have you pay equally over 10 months. Till you get to the very end of the year, and then the last 2 you don't have a payment. It's weird. They do all kinds of weird things like that. So with pay as you go, the nice thing again is it's going to actually track as you add employees, drop employees off. That amount will vary with you, and you're not going to have some major catch-up payment at the end of the year. It's all going to be pretty consistent, and it should make it even easier when you're going through your annual workers' comp audit. We can do another video which will go through these different functions and how you'll go through that whole process. But for right now, I'm just going to say, let's go remind me later. And we'll go done here. Okay, so we're all done setting up our payroll, and believe it or not, it is now time we can actually run our first payroll. Now, before we do that real quick, I'm going to show you one other area where all the payroll settings basically live. So if we go up to our top right gear icon, we'll then see our payroll settings right here. Now, inside this area is where you're going to see basically all the information we already were entering in, where it lives. So your general tax, of course, has company type, filing address, so forth. Your federal tax has your EIN number, your deposit schedule, and your filing requirements. California state tax, same stuff, but the state level. And then you have this auto payroll function here as well. So when you first set up your payroll, this auto payroll functionality is not going to be available yet until you make sure all those tax connections are all connected correctly, until you've actually processed a full payroll. Now, the nice thing is, though, if you follow back up and you go to set this up, if you have a business where, like, let's say you have a shareholder that's just paid the same amount every month, very consistently, same pay, same time, so forth, you can set up auto pay to just automatically handle payroll for you. And if you're using the full service payroll where they're doing the taxes, everything else, well, this really kind of like simplifies a lot of the payroll process. Now, you still want to go in and check it every once in a while. If you forget to take a peek at it every once in a while, I would hate to see that you run into a situation where some kind of an error occurred that could generate penalties or fines, of course. So the next area down below is our taxes and forms. And this is basically just the area where we're choosing like, hey, yes, we want you to pay the taxes, file the forms for us. We want it automatic instead of you being the one responsible for it, which is one of the questions we did during our initial setup. Now, work locations gives you the ability that if you have a larger company with multiple employees at different locations, you can actually assign a specific work location for each employee. And that sometimes comes into play with your workers' comp audits also. So it's a way you can really break everything down. Now, this next section is the email notifications. This is basically where do you want all of the email notifications surrounding payroll to be going to. And inside of this, you'll see the address it's supposed to go to, the different type of notifications that will be sent your way. And then payday reminders, you have this drop down. You can choose whether you want to be same day or sent day before submission is due. So I think having it as the day before is always great. Quick reminder like, hey, you got to do your payroll tomorrow in case you need to finish up adding those hours, so forth. And then your tax reminder is whether you want that on or off also. So we'll hit save here. Now, once that's been handled, you've got your employee profile management. And this is basically saying, hey, do you want your employees to be able to go in and modify and update all this stuff inside that workforce environment? I strongly suggest leaving this on. It gives them the ability that if they want to go through and change their tax withholdings throughout the year, they can do so, fill out a form automatic, and it's going to automatically change it inside payroll for you. So it also gives you kind of like that audit trail of that information. Finally, the next part here we've got is our shared data. So this is some value adds for the employees. It gives the employees, if they're using TurboTax, that they can automatically import from Workforce their W-2 data straight into TurboTax. And then they also have this other thing, which I'm just learning about, which is the work number from Equifax. What that basically is sometimes you have to validate where you're working and how much you're making. This is a partnership that Intuit did with Equifax to make that a little bit more automated. From this area, your bank accounts. So this is where you're going to show the accounting rounding number of where you want the money actually withdrawn from. That's for payroll direct deposit and for the the tax payments as well. Now, this is kind of important because it also maps out to what account in the bank feed that you're going to be going to. And I'm going to show you where that is in a moment to make sure they stay aligned. I have another video that's specific about that you can take a look at as well if you run into that challenge. Then on your printing here, you've got your options for pay stubs on plain paper or Paychecks on QuickBooks compatible check paper. So if you still want to be printing pay stubs to give to everybody, even though it's all digital, you can do it that way. You can get the 3 partition checks. As an accountant, when I would be running payroll for my clients, we'd get those 3 partition checks, and it would have the check stub on one piece and then the details of the check stub on the other part to put in an envelope and then give to the employees, of course. Then we've got our direct deposit, so funding time. All right, so this is an important one to pay attention to at first because, when you're first getting signed up, it says you can do direct deposit next day, direct deposit same day. Well, what this is actually saying is, hey, you need to pay your team 5 banking days before payday. You must have the funds to cover it all because you're brand new to payroll. So you're basically doing like a quality assurance check, if you will. And this is saying to apply for faster funding, come back after Sunday, October 8th. It is August 14th now, which tells me it's roughly about 2 months of time before you'll be able to get that quicker funding. So you need to kind of plan on that. Now, the accounting tab, this is pretty important information. So if you're a do-it-yourselfer, business owner trying to get all this set up, you may want to reach out and talk to your qualified professional, make sure that these things get set up appropriately. It's going to make handling your payroll a lot easier, especially your reporting, year-end reconciliations, everything else. But to try to explain what we're looking at here. So since we just set everything up, the first thing we're seeing here is we've got our paycheck and payroll tax payments bank account. I just alluded to it moments ago that we need to choose which account we want this stuff to be coming out of. So you should be selecting the same exact account when they did the bank deposits, those little micro deposits, it should be that same account. If you have a situation where this gets assigned to something different than the actual account that it's, linked behind the scenes, what will happen is the bank feed will still show the transactions coming through, but the actual payroll transactions themselves would be pushed into a wrong place. Now, I have a whole video on this whole part of it and how to fix it that you can reference should you ever run into that, of course. So we're going to change that. Now, our next one here is our wages expense. So inside of this, there are quite a few different ways you can track the wages. And the most common is going to be, a lot of people will usually just do all employee wages into one expense account. Now, some people actually want to have it a little bit different where they can break out the different wages by each person to their own expense account. And that would come into play like, let's say you've got construction people that are cost of goods of labor wise. You want to track all of the wages that are paid to your construction folks into one area. If you have admin or office people, you want to take those and put those into a different account that's not part of cost of goods possibly. And then you also, let's say you want to break out owners' salaries or draws of owner salaries, I should say. You could have it set up individually, and then you're going to have to choose for each person where it is that you want to go to. So in this scenario, I only have the one employee. If there were multiple employees, you'd have to do each one individually. Now, the final option here is you also can do each employee's wages are posted to different types of accounts. So this is where you could still do it different by employee, but if you need to be tracking out regular pay versus overtime pay, if you remember correctly, we created a second pay type we called electrical wage. So we would want to map these to the accounts we wanted to go to. The key is if you were doing each of these different pay types individually, when it comes time to do your reconciliation, it could be a little more challenging because you have all these sub accounts that need to roll back up. But there are reasons that you'd want to have like your holiday pay versus sick pay all broken out. Again, please reach out to your own specialist to reconfirm what's the best way for your company to do this. I'm going to go back and I'm going to just say, I'm going to do it by employee, and I'm going to go back to I'm going to do it to wages actually. I know it's part of that one, boom. And since we also said we have reimbursements every once in a while, we've got that as a reimbursement expense, boom, and save. So as we continue down, the next thing we'd have is we've got our company contributions towards health insurance. We have our tax, so the employer portion of the taxes needs to be mapped as well. So, and the reason for that is when it really comes down to what is the expense for a business when it comes to payroll, well, it's the total gross wages that an employee earned plus the employer portion of the taxes, because the employee part comes out of their check. You're just holding it until you send it off. That part you're holding on to, it becomes a liability, which we'll cover next. So our next item is our company contributions expense account. This is going to be for like if you're contributing towards health insurance or even retirement. And the reason for this is if the employer is matching a portion or paying for part of it, you need to record that portion of the expense against the business. The other part, when you're withholding money from the employee, so healthcare being an example, or health insurance, if they're paying part of the premium, you're deducting it from their check and holding it. Well, that's when we get into our liability accounts, which we'll get to in just a second here. Then our employee tax expenses. This is specifically, again, this is for the employer's portion of the tax only. So that way we can record that expense into the books itself. The total amount of tax that is withheld both from employee and employer becomes your tax liability accounts. Now, there's a couple different trains of thought on this. You have the ability for breakout wise. You can choose to just combine all these into one single payroll tax liability account and have it all bubble up. But I strongly recommend having an individual account for each one of these different types of taxes, because when you need to go back and reconcile, I think it's easier to find challenges when these are not zeroing out if they're broken out into these sub accounts. Some people like it the other way, my personal preference. Your class tracking gives you the ability that if you need deeper detail tracking for different employees, you don't have to use classes, or you can use the same class for all employees or do individual classes for different employees. You could actually use classes to tag the wages by a specific employee, like admin to one area versus officers to another versus your labor that's out in the field. Now keep in mind, the classes are only going to work if you're using QuickBooks Online Plus or Advanced. Those would be the only two choices where you could really use it. In our scenario, I'm not going to be using classes. So then our last part is we have our other liabilities we need to be tracking. And this again is the idea of here we put in for our payroll liabilities for our Kaiser Health for healthcare. That's the money that you're keeping aside both from the employee and the employer that's going to be paid out. If you gave people loans, would be tracked through here. All of this different information. Now the very last item that's really kind of hidden at the bottom here. This gives you the ability to update existing transactions. So if you come into here, you can basically come into here, set a starting date, and if you made modifications to any of these details, it will go through and update this stuff all the way back to what you choose to be as a start date. Now, the only thing that you cannot modify this way is what bank account was selected at the top here. So again, if that's a situation where the wrong bank account was selected, things are coming out of the wrong place, we'll have a link to the other video that you can watch, which shows you how to fix that after you've updated and corrected this part. So now everything's been updated. We've gone through all this stuff. You're ready to go, and it is time to process your first payroll. So if you basically want to jump in and go ahead and just pay your team right away, the easiest way to do it is you can, click on the Pay My Team button, or if you come up to Employees, you'll see that it says Run Your Payroll. Now, when you click Run Your Payroll, you'll get this new window here. And this is going to show you all the different fields where you can manually enter in the details to then be able to calculate the paycheck itself. So the first thing you're going to look at is you're going to pay attention to what your pay period is here. Now again, we've set it up to where we're saying we're doing this every week. So I'm setting it up, today is the 15th, so we're basically trying to say, okay, the pay period was from the 8/6 to 8/12. We'll select that, and we're going to say our pay period is this Friday. I've got my employee, it's just me, but I've got me selected. And now I can come into here and I'm going to say, in this scenario, let's say I worked for this week of time, I worked 35 hours regular. And then I also worked, let's say, another 10 hours of overtime. I'm just making this up as we're going. Now, part of the reason we're getting this little indicator at the top here is because in a sense, I'm doing historical payroll, and we're past what the normal direct deposit threshold would be for us to actually be able to get a person paid by the 18th. And that's just initially because we have that 5-day waiting window because we just got started with payroll. But we don't have to worry. So what we're going to do is, you can see it here at the moment. This popped up. Otherwise, you could go to your action item. We have the ability, instead of doing direct deposit, I've switched it over to paper check to make it to where I can hand write a check to give to an employee. So my other details in here, paid time off, that could be 0. Maybe they didn't use any sick pay, so forth. But hey, let's give me a bonus also. Why not, right? And from here, we can also add a little memo, bonus for being great, and save it. So you're going to see what this is basically doing is it's going to calculate your gross pay for you at this point. From here, you could then click and go save for later. And then you can basically go right back in if you know at a later point and just finish that up, of course. Let's go back in. So as we can see, all of our information pulled right up here after we saved it the last time. So, you know, to be thorough, we would do one last quick check, make sure the hours, everything else we had in here looks good. We can check our action. Again, we're going to be doing this as a paper check on purpose. We've got our pay date. So now we'll click and go preview payroll. So once you do your preview payroll here, you're going to be able to see more of the details about the actual paycheck itself. At the top here, you're going to see, of course, your total payroll cost, and that's talking about what is the actual total cost to the business. So what does that mean? That is going to be, of course, all the gross wages plus the employer paid payroll taxes and any portion of any contributions that you match as an employer. We will dive into those down here as well. Now we need to choose the account that this is going to get mapped out of as well. Once that's set, you shouldn't have to deal with that anymore, of course. Now you want to make sure, of course, the account that you're selecting here is the same account that you set up in the payroll setup and accounting preferences. That's going to make sure it's being drawn from the right account on the accounting aspect of this. So again, now below here, if we had more employees set up, you'd be able to see each and every employee listed out here, of course, the hours, gross pay, the employees' taxes and deductions, which then give them their net pay, and then we have our employer portion as well. Now, if I go down and I can click on my preview payroll details, what this is going to do is this is the full breakout like what would be on their check stub. So you can see every aspect of it. We have regular, our overtime. We have our bonus set up onto here. We've got our deductions for our healthcare, and then it shows the employee taxes, the employer taxes, and then the totals of everything throughout all of this. Net pay, total hours worked. So again, every bit of the details. We'll close that back out. And now we'll come through and we're going to hit submit payroll. Beautiful. Payroll is done. Now, again, because we did this as a paper check, it's saying you have one paper check to write. Deliver the checks to the employees by Friday, August 18th. You would see the check here. And you're going to want to, this is one thing everybody always skips over. If you're going to actually write or print these checks, please take the moment and actually put the check number in. It's going to save you a ton of time. If you ever have to go back, reconcile, and have questions on this stuff, it's super important to be able to reference back to that. Now, to print the paycheck, so I'm going to just put a check number. We're going to say 1001, right? Let's go and say print paycheck. So I'll go over to my downloads and let's show you what this is going to look like. This is a copy of the PDF that drops down that you can then print onto paper check stock. This is set up to be for a 3-section check stub, where the top, of course, is the actual paycheck portion. And then you have the breakdown of all the different pay types, the other pays, the benefits, so forth. One of the things I'd like to draw attention to is if you look in here under the benefits that you're seeing available for sick time, that is now bumped up to 1.5 because, again, we set that up as where it's accruing off of every hour that's worked. And if they used it, it would be calculating the used total. So it basically is tracking that stuff for you, which is great. Again, the third section, it just gives you the 2 different pieces as well as the check right above. Now, let me show you real quickly also like what we're talking about. So a 3-piece stub looks something just like this. Again, it's going to have the top piece where it would print on. And you'll notice, of course, on this, I'm using blank stock, so I don't have company information. I don't have the checking routing number, all that stuff at the bottom. So that's why you'd be using your specialized company check stock, and you would align it to fit correctly. We'll do another video that demonstrates how you can deal with the alignment, get the printing set up just to the way you like it, but it's really not too tough to do. Okay, so back to our payroll here. So we've looked at everything. Now, this is one of the things that it's super easy to skip right over, and if you do, it's kind of a pain in the rear to get back to. One of the things we always do, I know that we have reports, everything else inside of QuickBooks Online Payroll, but we always believe that you should come here and click the Download Payroll Reports. From this, you're going to get to choose all of the reports that you want to download and save, and it's going to go export to an Excel file basically. So your total cost, that's going to basically show you the total cost to the business, your tax payments, this is any payments that are going to be required to be paid out. Your tax and wage summary is breaking out obviously the gross wages, what parts tax, so forth. Your tax liability is the amount of tax you're going to owe, the liability being for both your portion and the employee's portion, and then the total pay. So let's go ahead and we're going to click on all of these, except we'll even do employee detail for right now to show you what these look like. And this is basically the group of Excel reports for everything. When you look at all this stuff in here, so each tab, they've done a good job of restructuring how this looks visually wise. So deductions, contributions, your first part. Again, this was the portions that we had set up into our payroll. Our payroll detail gives us a full breakout of everything that happened inside this one specific payroll. It's a lot, right? Especially, when you're taking into consideration if you are dealing with healthcare benefits, you've got to track all your employee, your employer portion, all of this information. Now, your payroll summary, keep in mind again, if you had more employees, you're going to see more lines of this information across this. This is one employee, so forth. So if there were multiple employees, if you had multiple departments, it could be broken up by department as well. So the payroll summary here, we've got our gross, employee taxes, after-tax deductions. It basically shows you every single part across pay method here. We put the check number in, or it would say DD for direct deposit. Your tax payments, because we haven't made any tax payments during this period of time yet. We just ran our first payroll. If you had made payments, it would be showing there. Here's your total cost. Again, as we spoke about before, this is basically summarizing up the gross, your total gross wages, your company's contribution towards healthcare on this one, and then the employer taxes gives you your total for everything all combined. Payroll taxes and wages, so total wages, your taxable wages, tax amount, tax percentage, then tax liability. So since, again, we haven't paid any taxes in this period of time, we're seeing the total tax amounts, then your taxes paid being 0 means, hey, we still owe this money. If we make the payments, the next time we pull this report up, it would show what's been paid, and then you can track to see what's still owed, of course. Total pay, again, if we had multiple employees listed here, you'd see every single one of them. Break out regular time, overtime, bonus, total. And then our last one is employee details that we had inside here. So every single person will be listed out, hire date, work location, pay information, tax info, and any notes you put for the employee. All right, so at this point, your payroll is pretty much done. The employee's been taken care of, they've been paid, but you still have one more task that it's important to check right away. The last thing you're going to need to look at is you want to take a look at your payroll taxes to see what's owed and when they're getting paid. The way you can do that is on the sidebar here, you'll go down to taxes and then you're going to go to payroll tax. Now keep in mind, if you've got the full service payroll set up and if you establish it to where they are the ones that will actually file and pay these taxes for you, especially once you've done your direct deposit, then these things will be automatically paid for you if you're using the full service payroll. If you're not, if you're electing to actually have it set up to where you want to pay the taxes when you want to, then you would need to come in here and pay attention to when these things are due and make sure they don't get filed late and there's no penalties to it. So on this page, you can basically see that we're accruing the different payroll taxes before their due date. And this part had to do with when you were setting up how frequently you actually have to pay those taxes. For a smaller company, some of these may only be due quarterly, so it would accrue all the way till you have to make that payment, and then the payment would go out. Of course, what that means is on your financials, on your balance sheet, your payroll liabilities will continue to increase until you finally make that payment. So if we click into any of these, we can see the details of the breakout also. If you're going to go to pay, you can very easily click the pay button, and if your direct deposit is all set up, you'll be able to pay it without even leaving this portal. You can only do those payments before they're late. If they're late, or I should say too late, you can usually get a bit of a buffer window, may still get a penalty, but if they're too late, you won't be able to do it through here, and you'll actually have to contact directly to the state organization, federal organization, and manually make those payments. So I can tell you, as a person who handles the payroll processing for many companies, one of the most expensive mistakes that can happen is if you don't pay these payments on time. The penalties will rack up very quickly, and it's not very easy to talk your way out of them or get out of them. You're basically going to end up having to pay extra just because it was paid late. And those late payment notifications, they take a while to get to you. So unfortunately, at first you may think you're okay, and then a couple months later they'll pop up. So since we're showing here at the moment, like, hey, we've got this liability here, let's go pull up a balance sheet and let's talk about where this is going to look or where it's going to land on. Now, keep in mind, guys, this is a fake company file that doesn't have a whole lot of data in it. So our balance sheet's not going to be sexy at this time. But what we will see is, we'll go for this month, the payroll liabilities that popped into there for us. So I'm going to do it for this month. As I come down into my liability section, you'll see my payroll liabilities here and the breakout of all of those different parts for that pay period. Once a check goes through and the payment's made, these then get cleared and zeroed out. So as a business owner, you really want to take a look at that balance sheet. And usually one of the best ways is you do the whole balance sheet by month for the whole year, and you'll see the trend where payroll liabilities will go up a bit and then it drops back down. It goes up a bit and then drops back down as those payments are going through. If it's not doing that, you may actually have a liability that's growing, maybe something didn't get paid, and you're going to want to look into that for sure. Now, on the flip side of this, let's also real quickly, let's go to our reports again, and we'll pull up a quick profit and loss for the same period of time. We'll go for this month. And what you'll see is all of our different expenses we had in here. So our wages, our taxes, and our contribution. So now you can see how each of the different parts are really affecting a company's financials, where again, all of the expenses you're going to see living on your profit and loss, of course, and then those liabilities will live on the balance sheet until they're paid down. So that is the complete payroll processing. You've been able to go through, we did all the setup, of course. We ran our full payroll processing. You're able to see the checks that you've created for each of the employees. And we even showed you how to go back, evaluate what taxes are due, when they're due. And then I think the most important part is how to look at both your profit and loss and your balance sheet to recognize how the expenses are hitting the P&L and those liabilities, how they live on that balance sheet until they get paid down. While it may be easy for smaller businesses to manually process their payroll, and by that what I mean is figuring out how many hours each person worked, whether it's regular time, overtime, dealing with time cards, everything else, as a business begins to grow and adds on employees, that becomes a lot more complicated and starts to take a lot more time. this is probably the perfect opportunity to introduce QuickBooks Time. Now, in a perfect payroll process workflow, what would happen is your employees would actually be utilizing QuickBooks Time to clock in and clock out, either from like their mobile devices or a specific computer that you have at your office itself. The benefit of that, of course, is now you have a digital record of everything, and when it comes time to actually run the payroll, all you have to do is go through, approve all of the different times, and then those hours will get sucked right into the payroll processing. So let's take a little side trip and let's talk about setting up and how you use QuickBooks Time. Since we elected to go with the premium version of QuickBooks Online Payroll, QuickBooks Time is automatically included in that subscription. It's also included in their Elite version as well. So from here, as we're on the time area, we can basically just click and go Launch QuickBooks Time. Now, initially, this dashboard is going to look pretty empty. That's because, well, we haven't done any setup and we haven't done any payroll yet. For the sake of this video, I'm going to show you some of the basic details and certain things you'd want to set up to get this process started or to be able to use this right away. But we're not going to dive in real deep into how to do specific time entries into different projects, how to track it, use custom fields. We'll do a different video for that aspect of it. Since you're just setting up the payroll, the first thing you want to do as soon as you land in QuickBooks Time, you're going to go onto the side here and you want to go straight to your company settings first off. Under your company settings, of course, you're going to see your company details. It's going to give you your basic company info, name, email, website, so forth. Admin is in who's the admin to contact with everything. And then you do have the ability, you can upload a custom logo, which is pretty cool as well. Now, you also have, of course, your account and billing. Then the most important one right off the bat is going to be your payroll and overtime. So inside here, it's going to say, hey, some of the information is already being set up within QuickBooks Payroll, which is why we set that up first, and then we pull over the information here. Now, the default pay schedule at first is going to say no predefined pay schedule. What we want to do with this, though, is we want to actually make sure to match this to what we have inside QuickBooks Online. So what I mean by that is we're going to choose the same pay schedule that's the standard for people, if you will. And then you want to choose and select the recent closing date for payroll. Now, it's important that you try to get this date right because we're trying to match up the time tracking to the actual pay cycles. So if you're not exactly sure on this, the best thing to do is head back over to QuickBooks Online Payroll real quick. Click on your payroll tab. You can come up to employees to where you can see this run payroll. If you just click run payroll real quick, this is the normal way. Like if you were going in to just manually do payroll, you'd come in here and type your information in, you're good to go. But what we're looking at just real quickly is we can see our pay period here, and we can see that this most current pay period is from the 13th to the 19th, which means the last day of the last pay cycle was the 12th. So if we come back here, recent closing date for payroll, 8/12 is what we actually want to show there. Now, the next part is overtime. And overtime is going to vary state by state. So you need to check with your professional, find out exactly what you need. I happen to be in California, and we have a fancy setting here because, well, California traditionally is the strictest when it comes to these type of things. This gives you the place to where you can select and choose specifically how you want the payroll, like the overtime, to be calculated. So in California, again, overtime is anything over 40 hours, or anything over 8 hours a day, and double time is anything over 12 hours a day. In California, if you'd set it up this way, this special rules basically is anything in excess of 8 and 12. The special rules for this state are then populated onto this. And you really need to reference this because this is going to help calculate when you're doing the time entries as to what needs to go to what area. Then our time options, of course, you should save. Time options is going to give you your time zone, your date format, different, details like that. The week start Sunday, because we set this up already in QuickBooks Online, but that's important because that has to do with that overtime as well. So your time entries tab basically has to do with who's going to have permission to manage their own timesheets. So if you allow team members to manage their own timesheets, it means they can actually go in and modify their clock in and clock out time. So if they forgot to clock in right on time, they can go put it earlier or later. But you basically can set it up to where managers are always notified if there are time edits that have been done. Of course, the next one is saying allow team members to track time on their mobile app. That is ultimately the goal there, but you can go into company settings and turn it off to where if you want it to be a kiosk only, in other words, you don't want them just having the control themselves, they have to go to a specific computer, you could set that up that way instead if you prefer. You also have the ability for team members to enter notes on their time clock in the mobile app. So you can have it set up whenever they're clocking in and clocking out that they have to put a note of what it was that they were doing. This can be really useful, especially if you're having them switch between jobs. And as I was saying, you can start to do some job costing with this and have those extra notes. You would want to have that turned on, of course. You can make notes required or not. They can edit old ones or not. And then there's definitely email capabilities for verification processes through all this. So you're going to want to kind of take a look through some of these details. The allow team members to adjust their clock out time. So that's if they forgot to clock out and it went longer, more than 10 hours, that they could then have that iteration to be able to adjust it. If you have people that are working overnight, you can have a setting where it splits the timesheets at midnight. But this is one I'm going to suggest you need to check with your payroll professional to make sure within your area that you can legally do that. That's in a sense kind of saying that this becomes two different shifts. So additionally, on this main dashboard, you can display who's working. So when people are signed in, you could clock in and see who's actually working and how long they've been working. Then your time off tab. This in here becomes a question of who can set up the time off and when time off can actually be taken. So the reason you would set something like this up, and you do actually have to do a little extra setup on it, is if you have unpaid time off, well, you can have people tracking like, hey, I decided to take all day Friday off, mark it down for 8 hours as unpaid, or you can set it up to where you have paid times. As you saw, I just kind of clicked the setup time codes, and automatically, because of what we set up inside of QuickBooks Online, it's creating these codes for us: our holiday, paid time off, sick, vacation. And all of these, you can choose whether you assign them to all team members or individually add them on. You can change a lot of these settings at the employee level as well. Now, if you're working with employees that are maybe out in the field, you also have the ability to turn on the location tracking. This can either be a required, optional, or off. Now, I will say right off the bat, no matter which one of these you select, if a person is clocked out or on a break, it does not do any type of location tracking whatsoever. If you choose the required version, what that means is they're required to have this on when they clock in and to keep it while they remain on the clock. If they turned off the location tracking, it would automatically clock them out. On the optional, the team members can decide whether or not to track their location. This is also able to tie together with enable nearby customers. So with your customers, and if you have the addresses in, it'll be able to pull up a map and show them like where the customers are at. And in a sense, it's kind of like a geofencing, or show you if they're actually near, like close to where a customer is located, of course. So our My Team tab now starts to talk about what permissions you want to provide to your team. Allow them to manage their own email address, their own settings, and their own time zones. And then the access restrictions. So this is back to the idea that if you want to have individuals clocking in by a specific computer, you can authorize a computer and everybody has to clock in and out there, or you can even do it by location or even by an IP address. So the point of these, of course, is to try to eliminate people clocking in for other people, time theft as they would call it. Under notifications is pretty cool. It gives you the ability to send people either clock in and clock out reminders to their mobile or their email. You choose what are the days, the times you want to do it for, as well as you can even send other notifications like if a shift was published or changed, if they forgot to clock in after a shift, forgot to clock out after a shift. All these different things can be sent as notifications. Now I'm going to tell you, initially you're going to be like, hey, this is cool, man. I can remind my people they need to clock in, clock out. And they're going to be sending these notifications. Use it somewhat sparingly. You're going to annoy yourself and your team if you go crazy with this. This is one of those things where you kind of maybe set it up, let people know, hey, it can be done, turn it back off, and then say, obviously we don't want to have to use this, but if you're not remembering to get your clocking in and clocking out, I'm going to have to turn this back on. So it's a great resource, but use it sparingly for sure. Okay, so finally, the last thing we have here is a system log that basically tells you all the stuff that's going on, and you can download it, look at it. So if there's ever questions or things are getting changed, you can look in here and see what's basically happening. Now, the next part that you're going to want to take a look at is that, well, there's two ways to get it. We want to basically look at what are the company's settings between QuickBooks Payroll, Online Payroll to QuickBooks Time. You can come to Feature Add-ons and look at it this way. Or I always find it easier if you just come up here to QuickBooks Payroll, click it once, and then come down to your preferences here. And what this is going to show is what information are we sucking out of QuickBooks Online Payroll or QuickBooks Online so it can be used inside of QuickBooks Time. We have the option, of course, we can be pulling in customers, sub-customers. So that's where you can be assigning time activities. The employee can assign time activities to a specific customer or sub-customer. You can choose whether things should be billable or not. Again, if you're not really tracking billable time, you probably would turn this off. You also can do service items. Now, service items are necessary if you want to expand into doing job costing and pushing like time activities into different projects. If you're not selecting customer and a service item, it won't map over correctly. You won't be able to use that. You can also choose, if you did set up different classes in payroll, that you can pull those in to be able to use also. Keep in mind, every item that you select on here becomes part of the timesheet that the employee is going to have to fill in each and every time when they're doing a time activity. My strong suggestion is, if you're just starting off with getting employees into digital time clocks, I've always found that there tends to be some initial kickback from employees because they don't want to have to be clocking in, clocking out from some kind of device. So I usually recommend get them started into using this, get them used to clocking in, clocking out, and once you've got them on that process, then introduce the ability to start using the service items and maybe customer to where it can be assigned to a specific place. And I will say one other important thing. As a business owner, if you're asking your employees to be doing this, and if you want this to be successful, I've always found if you as a business owner actually do your own clocking in and clocking out, they will see that as well, respect it, and the success rate of an implementation of a digital time tracker goes through the roof. So in our scenario, I'm going to click on service items. I have some stuff created in QuickBooks Online I want to be pulled in. And I'm going to say billable yes or no. They're not required to choose yes or no, but they have the ability to do that. And now that these are all set up here, what we can actually do is come up and we can do a sync basically. So to sync it, what we're actually talking about doing is we're going to import this time. We're going to pull the data in. We'll click on the import. This will spin for a little bit. It's nice. It lets you tell you there basically. And then once that's complete, we'll be actually able to go and see the log to see everything that happened. So if you ever run into an issue where for some reason it seems like data is not being synced or pushed back out, any kind of an error, they do really have great detail in here to help you understand what's happening. So we can see in this instance, we imported team member into this. We also set up the different payroll items for me, Spartacus, right? My regular overtime, sick, paid, holiday bonus. We didn't import any customers, and we didn't bring any service items in here at this time. There's also, you can see with auto that's here, that means it auto ran because it will try to process the stuff occasionally. And part of the reason it didn't bring in the service stuff is, well, because it already did when I first set them up. So we've got all of these different service items on here. It imported our different customers that we have inside of here. So now if I'm actually looking in here, I'm going to be able to see my different customer list. I can come back over here. I would be able to see my team. My team would have all the different employees listed as well. And then if I click in and I want to edit at the employee level, you can update specific details inside of here. Their permissions, which customers it is that you would like them to have access to. So if you want to basically assign only certain clients to certain people, you can actually pull that off and assign it to just certain ones. Now, part of the reason to do some of this is, keep in mind, if you have an employee that's on a mobile device and you're asking them to select all these details, in my mind, the least number of clicks always wins. So that means if they don't need to access certain customers and they're never going to work on that stuff, hiding it from them might be a good idea. This is also a way that as customers maybe need to be archived, you can pull away access to that also. There is the ability to add on additional custom fields. Again, we'll do a deeper video to show some of that stuff at a different time. You've got the time off settings we talked about. You can see these ones are synced to QuickBooks. Our overtime calculations, because we were using them for the company settings. That's why we had you set that up first. But if you need to do custom rules, maybe you have people in different states, you can do that individually as well. Choosing whether location tracking, what you want to do for it or not, and then the notifications as well. So with that notification, do you want to set up for individual employees so you don't have to notify all your team members just because you have one person who's always late? You can go straight to that one person and sign them up that way. Okay, so those are the basic settings of the stuff to kind of get you started. Now, I'm going to close out all these different little windows. They start to pop up there and get in the way quickly, but you just close them all out. So now we're inside of here as myself. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in, and because we want to just do time entries at the moment, this is basically like, okay, I tracked everything I did for the day, but I want to go back and add it in real quick. I can do that. We have our timesheets, a manual time card, and a slider here. The manual time card is very much like the weekly timesheet if you're familiar within like desktop and QuickBooks Online, where you select and then you put your hours specific for that day and the amount of time. Your timesheet is going to be adding one time at a time. So let's click in. We're going to go add a time. I'm going to choose my team member, and that unfortunately is my last pass that is trying to autofill there. So you can do it by email or name. And you select the person, time in, time out, or duration. So time in, time out would be if I wanted to select, I came in today, we'll say at 8 a.m., right? I can go 8 a.m., select my a.m. here. And then we will say I quit at 6:59 p.m. Kind of doing that on purpose so we're over our time. So from here, now we've got the choice to select a customer if I wanted to. Again, you don't have to, but if you want to, you can do it this way. So let's come in and we'll put this to one person. Service item now, because I set it to be required, I'm going to choose what it was I was working on. And let's say we were doing our monthly marketing on this one. Billable is not necessary, and then I want to add some additional notes. We'll say set up of new marketing channel. Who cares? Something like that. Time zone. Now, if you're going to be entering a whole bunch of times, you can click this little bottom button here. It says keep the editor open after save, so that way it doesn't shut down. I can just click and go save. So with this, now I have time added in, right? It's giving me this little icon because it's telling me, hey, it exceeded those 8 hours, so you probably want to review it. We're going to kind of get ahead of ourselves here, and let's say, so we'll say now it's the 15th, and this time let's just do a duration for the heck of it, and let's say on this day I worked 6 hours. Same, this one, why don't we do a different person? We'll do this one to Mr. Ernest Cook here, and this one we're going to say we were doing web design creation, fancy new website. And boom, OCD for spelling, and I can click it and I'm going to go save. So now we basically have two different time activities in here, and I'm sure you can do the rest imagination wise if we like had a whole week's worth of time in here. But let's take a look at the manual time card, and you'll see if we're pulling up the exact same user, we can see it's all laid out, same idea. We got the time wise by the person, so forth, and then you can even add an extra note on right here for this specific time card. So once we've got everything in, we basically get to hit save. It's already been saved in there. And now we're going to basically say, hey, it's time to process payroll. So as the person that's set up as the approver, you would come into here and you'd be able to click on approvals. Under your approvals, you're going to choose your report period either by week, pay period, custom range. So I'm going to choose pay period. I think it's always the easiest. And so if you were doing pay period every 2 weeks, it would cycle this 2 weeks instead of, it predefines it is the whole point. So we're going to choose our week, and then we're going to see we could actually do it by a team member or just everything. We're going to click Run Report, and now you're going to be able to see a list of anybody who's actually on the payroll and how many hours they worked or not. You can click in to view details, and you'll be able to see like, okay, here's a little bit of breakout. This we did X amount for Seth, X amount for Ernest, but it's also going to tell us like how much time was regular time versus overtime inside here as well. These can all be like resized if you want to make it a little bit bigger, so forth. But we'll see that on here again, we've got our in, our out, our hours, day total, week total. So it all starts to go in and combine. If you needed to come into this and edit these, you can click on this little pencil piece, and it's going to give you the ability as the manager to come in and modify and edit this. The audit log is going to capture all of it, who made the edits, so forth. And again, you can limit who does this part. For right now, we're going to say, hey, this is all great. We're super happy with it all. Again, at the top here, what's happening is you're seeing regular hours, overtime, total hours is the breakout over here. I kept waiting for that pop-up to show up there. So if we approve this, what we're going to do is we're going to click and we're going to say approve. You're about to approve and lock time through the end of the 19th. So this is happening because, again, for the sake of this video, I'm trying to show you how to get the hours over. We haven't actually reached the end of the pay cycle for this person, so it would be locking it up. We're going to say okay. And you can come in, if you haven't pushed the data over to QuickBooks Online Payroll, you could come back in and just unapprove it and open it back up. But employees won't be able, if it's approved and locked that way, they can't go in and change time. They can't add anything in unless you unlock it. So we've got it approved. Then the last thing we need to do at this point is we're going to click and say export approved time. Now, before I click the button real quick, we're going to come back into here over to QuickBooks Online Payroll, and we're going to go to our employees. We've got our payroll set up here, and I'm just going to click into here so you can basically see like there's no hours that have been pushed in whatsoever at all, right? It's just a fresh little environment with nothing there. We'll close back out of this, come back to our QuickBooks time, and now let's go ahead and say export approved time. You're going to export X number of hours for one person. And again, you can see all the details, click into it, see what's going on there, all the notes, so forth. So you really get to kind of walk through all aspects of it. Sizing is being weird. So we're going to go export all the hours. So if there's any kind of an error or something, then it would populate here. Like if I actually had hours for David down here, since he's not on payroll, it would have created an error basically. We've now processed, we've basically pushed the time in. So now if we come over to employees, right? And we say, okay, we're ready to run our payroll. Let's click on run payroll. And automatically my hours populated right in. Hours were automatically added, boom. If there's additional stuff, so this works great for your regular time, your overtime, your paid leaves, all that kind of stuff. But let's say you need to add on a bonus. You can manually come into here and add on a bonus. You can add an additional memo. Bonus for being great. Boom. And that would actually show up on the pay stub as well. Now, if you try to come in here and watch, if I try to change this to 12, it's going to pop up and say, hey, your timesheet hours will be out of sync. Because if you're using QuickBooks Time, you want to make sure all time is in there and gets pushed over correctly. Are you sure you want to proceed? We're going to say cancel. We're going to make sure that goes back to what it was. So it's all added, nice, beautiful, wonderful. You can, of course, customize this table. So if you remember correctly, initially we had a whole bunch of different pay types on there. I shrunk it down a little bit so we could see it nicer here to where I took them off of me as a pay type, but you could shrink this down if you didn't need to see that. And then any employee that you're going to be paying will have to be checked off. So from here, you have the option that you can basically either click on save for later in case you just put some hours in, but you need to go maybe double check something and you don't want to lose the work. You can save for later, or you could click preview payroll. Now, there's also this action item on the side here. And under the action item, you notice it populated a little bit bigger, and I've got direct deposit or paper check. Keep in mind, in our video right now, we just finished doing the setup, so it's not completely linked. And I don't actually want to send myself a direct deposit because I'm doing this as a video. So I'm going to change it over to a paper check. So we'll click on Run Payroll. And now you can see we're able to see our total payroll costs for this specific pay period, letting us know the pay period, the pay date, the account it's coming out of, all of our total hours, gross pay, employee taxes and deductions, the net pay, and even our employer tax contributions. So from here, you can click your preview payroll detail to see all of the specific information that would basically be on a check stub. And then when you're ready to go, you're going to click and do Submit Payroll. If you're not ready, you can click the drop down arrow and save for later and save all of this. We'll click Submit Payroll for now. This will pull up and congratulations, payroll is all done. So now you're all done with the processing portion of payroll, but we still want to print our paycheck, or if it was a direct deposit at this point, it would be set up and ready to go for direct deposit. Now, if you're doing paper checks, as we've always suggested before, you really want to find out what the actual check number is that you're going to be using and be sure to add it in right away. You can then click on Print Paycheck, and it will take and it's going to download a copy that you'll be able to print from PDF. Also, while you're here, don't forget to download your payroll reports. You can choose which ones you want to have set up inside of here, and then export to Excel. And that also will drop down. Now, the reason I stress that part is if you don't download that right there and you want that same group of payroll reports, you either have to go in manually and do them one at a time, or in the memo notes below, I'll give you the link back to another video I've created that kind of shows you a cheat way to get back to get that bulk group of reports. The way it's designed or organized on that download is much nicer than if you have to go in and create them one at a time. It'll save you a lot of time, trust me. So at this time, you are all done with this payroll processing. Now, the one last thing to keep in mind is if you did not set up full service payroll, where Intuit is actually paying and filing all of your payroll taxes, you do want to make sure to go in down into your tax area to payroll taxes and take a look at what payroll taxes are accruing and what are the dates that these things are actually due. That would have been part of when you were doing your initial setup and you told Intuit how frequently you have to make those deposits. So if they're not doing those payments for you, it's your responsibility to come into here, make sure that these payments are not late. If they are late, you will be fined or penalized for it, and that can rack up pretty quick. So after you do that final check, believe it or not, you are finally done. Your payroll's been processed, your employees have been paid. Heck, it means it's time for you to kick back, relax, enjoy the weekend, because you don't even have to worry about payroll till your next pay cycle, maybe next week. So if you found this video to be helpful, I'd like to ask, take a quick moment, like and subscribe to this channel. Don't forget to hit that bell so you're notified about new videos as they come out. And of course, at the very beginning, we told you we were going to share with you a couple different ways that you could connect with us in case you're looking for additional support or additional information. If you haven't already, be sure to check out our Facebook group called QB Community Live. It's a group made up of 2,500 bookkeepers, accountants, and tax professionals. This is a free resource that you can use to basically go in, ask questions, and get professional answers from people who really know what they're talking about. Of course, if you'd like to connect with me directly, you can go to my company website, Parkway, and you can actually send over a request and I'll be able to reach out to you, connect right away. We do offer one-on-one training as well as workflow consultation. So reach out, let us know what kind of a problem we can help you solve, and we'd love to do it. Now, finally, we all know that payroll is much more than just this one video. There are so many more topics that we still need to cover. So we're taking this video and we're going to be putting it into a course where we can expand off of this. There are so many other topics like workers' comp, how you deal with that, how do you set up your health insurance deductions and contributions for companies, and so many other things. Deleting paychecks, reconciling it all. I don't want to bore you with all the different answers, but we'll put a link in the description below to where you can sign up for early access to this course we'll be working on very, very soon. So once again, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. We truly, truly hope it was helpful. And as always, here's wishing you all a very successful week.